Hello and welcome to this information webinar about the new supportive housing that has recently opened at the former Howard Johnson Hotel in the 1100 block of Granville Street and the former Buchan Hotel in the 1900 block of Haro Street in downtown Vancouver. My name is Diana Bully and I'll be your host and moderator for the session today. I would like to acknowledge that while our session together is virtual, as participants, we are grateful to live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. The purpose of today's session is to introduce the housing site partners and their roles. We want to share information about supportive housing, present plans for these two sites in the short and longer term, and then we're going to ask the partners to respond to some of the frequently asked questions that have been coming into their organizations over the past few weeks. This webinar is the first engagement session about these projects, and we're going to learn more about some of the future opportunities to participate in the conversation. I'd like now to introduce our panelists and their role in this housing projects. First, we have Dominic Flanagan. He is the Executive Director and Strategic Advisor on Homelessness Supportive Housing Programs for BC Housing. Next, we have Bonnie Wilson, Director of the Vancouver Inner City and Program Lead for Mental Health and Substance Use for Vancouver Coastal Health. Celine Mobilis is the Acting Managing Director for Homelessness Services and Affordable Housing Programs with the City of Vancouver. Inspector Rob Clark we have on the phone, and he's with the Vancouver Police Department in the Operations Division for District 1. Brooke Mells is the Executive Director of Operations at Atira. Welcome and thank you all for joining with us today. I'd now like to turn it over to Dominic Flanagan from BC Housing, who's going to share some information about the two new supportive housing sites.
Thank you, Diana. And thank you for this opportunity to provide more information about the new supportive housing programs at the Howard Johnson and the Buchan hotels. Next slide. So the purpose of this engagement is we at BC Housing, we are committed to working with our partners, the businesses, local businesses and the immediate neighbours to build positive relationships and to really support the success of the new supportive housing at the two hotel sites. And that success is only through partnerships. And to really truly address homelessness, we need strong, effective partnerships at the ground level. So that's why at BC Housing, we've got a strong partnership with the City of Vancouver, Vancouver Coastal Health, and we want to build and maintain our partnerships with the local community. We've heard from community in the downtown area of Vancouver. We've heard concerns and questions about the new supportive housing that's been put in place. We also know that some of those concerns have been long-standing and have been present in that community before the hotels were converted into supportive housing. And we recognise at BC Housing that the new supportive housing programs we've put in place are part of the solution. But one building alone is not going to solve homelessness within the downtown area of Vancouver. We need to do more and we need to build more partnerships. And when it comes to homelessness, it's always important to realize that when we're talking about people who are homeless, we're not talking about a group, homogenous group of people. There's a range of reasons why people become homeless. So it may be due to structural factors, and so it may be a lack of affordable rental housing that we see here in Vancouver and across BC. It may be issues of poverty. There may be systemic issues, and that might be people who are discharged from hospital into homelessness, or people leaving corrections and released into homelessness. And there may be individual factors as well. And this could be for traumatic events in someone's life, a range of health issues, including mental health, physical health, or addictions. But it's a combination of these factors which cause people to become homeless. And that's why at BC Housing, we follow the housing first approach, because we recognize The biggest difference you can make in someone's life who is street or sheltered homeless is to provide that home, to provide that safe and supportive environment. So we bring people inside and we make sure those additional supports are in place, because that journey of recovery starts to begin once people are brought inside and into their own homes. And it's important to realize that that journey of recovery can only start, as I say, when people are housed. It's hard to make those positive changes in your life when you're living on the street or sleeping in a doorway. And at BC Housing, through programs like these supportive housing programs, we hear from people concerns about safety, and we want to create a safe community for everyone within the downtown area of Vancouver. And there's a number of ways we do this, but I would draw your attention just to a couple of key ones on this slide. It's through the experience and working with a non-profit operator such as the Atira, who have deep-rooted experience and expertise in working with marginalized and vulnerable populations. And also, we're going to be starting this month community dialogue groups. And we find these groups that are really act as a really good sounding board. The groups are made up of immediate neighbours, local businesses, but they also have representations from BC Housing, Vancouver Coastal Health, the City of Vancouver, and the VPD. It's a really good opportunity for the local neighbourhood to get together and to talk about what's happening in their area regarding the supportive housing programs we've put in place. And when we talk about supportive housing, this slide just shows a good reminder of what we're actually meaning. So in the case here, everyone has their own room and they have their own access to their own private washroom. As I said before, all the supportive housing has on-site 24 supports 7 days a week. And here at the two hotels, we're developing robust and strong partnerships with Vancouver Coastal Health, and we'll hear more about that later. So what's happening? So the Howard Johnson is operating as a temporary supportive housing site. At the Buchan Hotel, that'll open shortly and provides housing for vulnerable women who are homeless or at risk of being homeless. At the Howard Johnson site, in the long term, we want to explore options for affordable homes within that area. We recognize the need for more affordable housing, and we want to work with the City of Vancouver and consult with the local community about what an affordable housing should be at that location. And this is where we're at in the engagement timeline. And as from today, if you have any more questions, comments, concerns, please click on this link on our BC Housing website, and we will get back in touch with you, and we look forward to working with you on around these supportive housing programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. We appreciate that presentation. So we've heard from BC Housing, and now I would like to ask that each of the panelists tell the viewers a little bit about their role in the community and as it relates to these housing sites. So I'd like to start with Bonnie from Vancouver Coastal Health. Bonnie, can you tell us a little bit about your role and the kind of involvement that you'll have with these two sites?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the panel. This is great. So Vancouver Coastal Health is there as a key partner, working really closely with the provider. So in this case, it would be Atira. So working with Atira to provide the health support that the individuals in the sites would need. That might be mental health care, that might be access to addiction services, and it could be basic primary care services like you would get from your family physician. So we have all of those services that are there and available, and we work really closely with Atira, who get to know the individuals probably the best, and we work with them to get to know the needs of the individuals and really be that bridge between their housing needs and their healthcare needs.
That's great. Thanks so much, Bonnie. Celine, can you tell us a bit about the city's role and your role in these two housing sites?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Diana. And like Health, we consider ourselves an important partner and are really pleased with the purchase of the hotels, because homelessness is an ongoing issue in neighborhoods across the city, not just the downtown core. And in terms of our role, one of the things that we do is we do support kind of good building operations. So we work with the operator to ensure basic life safety through regular inspections, and we try to support BC Housing and the operator in any other ways that we can. We'll also obviously respond to concerns from the community and have ongoing conversations with the BIA and other partners in the neighborhood, and we'll be a partner in the community dialogue group that's being established. Thank you.
Thank you, Celine. And Inspector Robert, on the phone, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your role in the community and as it relates to the two housing sites as well.
Yeah, so the policing role, I mean, we're hearing from concerned citizens in the area who are a little bit fearful for public safety. You know, obviously we're dealing with people some of whom have mental health issues, some are battling addiction issues. So it's not just a policing issue, obviously, but there are people that are sometimes displaying aggressive behavior. So our plan moving forward is essentially to increase patrols in those areas and have a high visible presence from the police department. I've worked with my executive. It's a priority for the Vancouver Police Department right now. We're actually reassigning 14 officers from their current duties to particularly target those areas and be visible in those areas and be accessible for the community to reach out to us. We've trained an additional 20 officers to deploy on bicycles in that area. Again, just so they can be accessible through the parks, the lanes, the alleyways, and in and around the shelters. We've worked with city sanitation to increase a little bit of street cleaning, worked with city engineering to dismantle some structures that are coming up in the area, and formed a working group to deal with some of the increase in weapons. And surprisingly, we've had a number of disturbance calls involving bear bangers, so we're actually working with the city, and there's a motion going forward tomorrow to sort of restrict the sale of bear bangers within the city of Vancouver. So we're going to continue to work with our mental health outreach teams, liaise with staff at the designated shelters regarding some hotel management strategies. But really the role of the Vancouver Police in this is just to ensure public safety.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And Brooke, can you tell us a little bit about Atira's role as the operators of the site and what kinds of things that you're responsible for?
Yes, thank you, Diana. So we're pleased to be the nonprofit partner, working with all of you, and first and foremost the folks who have moved in or are moving in. We are an anti-violence women's organization, but our range of programs range to also co-ed supportive housing sites, as well as women's only or women and children's programs. Our main role is really to support the tenants who have moved in, build a relationship first and foremost, and get to know where they are at to support them to move to where it is they would like to be in their lives. We will be a primary contact for the community. A key part of our role is to engage with neighbors and to be a good neighbor, and just work through any issues that arise, and as well as linking with health, the city, our police liaison, and BC Housing.
That's great. Thanks for that overview, Brooke. Okay, so we've heard now from everybody here about the new housing and their roles and about how everyone is working together to support people in need. Now I'd like to ask our panelists to respond to some of the common questions that various organizations have been receiving over the past little while. And I'd like to start with you, Dominic, just to kind of broaden it out a little bit and ask you, why is BC Housing purchasing hotels? This is perhaps a newer endeavor for them, and what's the reasoning behind that? And then what is kind of the long-term vision in the purchase of these hotels?
Thank you. So as we've heard, another panelist have already mentioned, we're in the midst of a homelessness crisis here in the city of Vancouver. and it's really important that we provide housing opportunities. And one of the quickest way to do that is through the purchase of a hotel. So we've been working with a number of hotel operators in the downtown area, and we had this opportunity. And what it has meant is that people who were formerly street homeless have now an opportunity to really turn their lives around. So I think it's the immediacy and the challenges we are facing around, particularly visible street homelessness. And so there's an opportunity here to make that immediate, quick difference. In terms of the long term, I think what we recognize that we need a whole range of housing programs, from affordable rental for seniors and families through to supportive housing. So we recognize that we need to build up that and develop further that continuum of housing programs. So in the long term, that's what we want to do across the city of Vancouver, develop more housing opportunities within the city.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of what the neighbors around one of these sites can expect from BC Housing and its partners when one of the hotels is converted to supportive housing, what are the kinds of things that someone as a neighbor could expect from you or these partners?
Well, as part of this process, and I mean, we recognise it's been a challenging time because of COVID-related issues. We normally meet with people in person through the community dialogue group. So it is a bit of a challenge at the moment. But what we want to do is consult and engage with the immediate neighbours, be them residential or businesses, and to start to inform people what is actually happening. And you know, I've been on the phone with people, individual people. Brooke and I were out this week meeting with people as well, immediate neighbours in the area. And more of that will continue throughout the summer and into the fall. We want to work with people and respond to their questions and their concerns.
Okay, thank you. Brooke, I'd like to ask a little bit more about Atira, and you've mentioned that you provide support services to folks, but could you tell me a little bit more about Atira's approach to helping support an individual tenant's needs? What does that look like?
Sure. The very first focus is basically building a relationship. It's really hard to meet individuals where they're at and understand where they may want to go until we've built a relationship, built an opportunity to understand their experiences, particularly with the Haro Johnson, where folks may have been homeless for months, possibly years, and this might be the first time they're coming indoors in a very long time. So being aware, cognizant, conscientious of those changes in their lives is huge for us. So we're not there to, you know, dictate how people live their lives, but to be there to support when they're looking to link to support services. Food security is a key component as well, access to food program, linking to income assistance, the range of health services that Bonnie spoke about earlier, and really being there when they are ready. That's the key thing. Sometimes folks are wanting to reconnect with family. Maybe they want to access detox or recovery. And when that window opens, our goal is to be there and support them to access and link to those services. We are also the landlord as well, so we have housing and support service staff.
Great. Thanks. Something that comes up fairly frequently is the question about why Atira and others will allow people to safely consume substances inside the building and or inside their homes even. Could you tell us a little bit more about that, what's behind that?
Sure, and I think, Diana, you've hit on the key point. It is their home, so we're not there to have make choices for people in terms of what they do in their homes, but our role is to help support them to do that safely. As everyone knows, we are still very much in a opioid epidemic. And the first, you know, we can't support anyone to make different choices if they're not alive. So to reduce harm, the harm reduction approach saves lives. And so our role is to ensure that people are safe, they're not using alone, if at all possible, and encourage engagement. And take away the stigma from that as well. Often people are using alone due to stigma. So if we are building relationship and supporting folks in their homes, we can then hopefully move forward with them.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Bonnie, you've talked a little bit about the services that are provided, but perhaps you could tell a little bit more about some of the details. That's a question that we hear frequently. What are the medical or mental health helps that people are getting, and how are those delivered to folks?
Sure, yeah. There's actually quite an array and variety, and I just do want to build on what Brooke was saying about the overdose prevention. That really is critical. And so what we have been doing is working with Atira and any other housing provider around supporting overdose prevention within the sites as well as in the neighborhood. And that's an incredibly important piece of work that we have to do. Is, as Brooke said, you have to take people where they're at, and a harm reduction approach is really the first step. And so that's a key thing that we do with all of our housing providers, and it's a really important thing that we've been doing with the two sites that we're talking about today. On top of that, we have clinics actually in the neighborhood in very close proximity to these sites. So we have the Three Bridges Community Health Center, and at that health center, we have a wide variety of services. We have a mental health team, we have addiction support, we've got support for people who have basic wound care needs, and we also have a primary care clinic. And when we talk about a primary care clinic, it is GPs, family physicians and nurses and addictions counselors and community liaison workers. So we have all of those services that are at the Three Bridges Clinic. We also have an urgent primary care center in the neighborhood. So if somebody has an urgent need and need to come in and see someone, and maybe they aren't attached to a doctor already, they can go to the urgent primary care center. There's also the regional, the Rapid Access Addiction Clinic, which is at St. Paul's Hospital. So if someone is needing access to addiction services and supports, they're able to go in there. It's a very low barrier, what we would call low barrier, so easy for people to access. And it's a great resource that's in the neighborhood. In addition to those more clinic-based services, we have a wide variety of outreach services that are also going out to the sites. We have teams that are going out and they're providing all of those similar services in the buildings. They're going to the buildings almost on a daily basis. Their goal is to connect with every single person in these buildings, let them know who they are, let them know what services are available, build that relationship, build that rapport, build the trust. As Brooke said, some people have been homeless for a long time. They've been disenfranchised by many of our systems, including the healthcare system. So it does take some time for us to build that trust, but we're really, really committed to doing that with them. And a real key component, as I mentioned before, is working with a housing service provider that's there, ensuring that they know how to help the individual navigate our system, which is sometimes a pretty complicated and not to untangle. So it's really important that we have those relationships with the provider and reaching out to all of those buildings. And we've been doing that at those sites, building the linkages and knocking on every single one of those doors and offering services and supports and ensuring that people know how to come and find us when they need it and when they're ready.
That's great, thank you. Another question that we have come in a fair amount is around if someone's experiencing perhaps a serious mental health issue and it's in public, people often don't really know how to respond and what to do, and they may want to help or they may be a bit fearful. And do you have any advice for what somebody should do if they encounter a person that's struggling with a mental health issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think really first and foremost, if you're seeing anybody who's having any kind of health crisis, no matter what the symptoms are, if you're seeing that someone is really struggling and having a health crisis, whether it's a mental health crisis or other, we really want you to call 911. And you know, through that mechanism, the right assessments can be made, and either an ambulance is sent or the police are sent. And if we have time, there are opportunities where we're able to send a mental health team with the VPD officers. We have a variety of programs that actually partner our services with the VPD in a really successful way. And so if that's something that's required, and again, if we have got the time to set that up behind the scenes, then that is something that we would do. But really urgently, as I've said, with any healthcare issue, we do encourage people to call 911. If we have the time, and if we know an individual, I think the inspector that's on the line, he mentioned that we do have these partnerships. We have something called assertive community treatment teams, and it is a partnership, a very intensive mental health team that includes police officers that are able to really intervene in really complex situations. And we've had those partnerships for a really long time, and I think that they've been a real benefit and value to the clients that we serve and our communities.
Okay, thank you so much, Bonnie. That's very helpful. And just maybe further to build on that, I'll turn it over to Inspector Rob Clark. And I'm wondering if you could describe a little bit more. You provided some information in your introduction, but to tell us a bit about the measures that the Vancouver Police Department is taking to protect public safety in the Granville Street area. So would you like to just maybe provide a bit more detail around what you were describing earlier?
Yeah, essentially, you know, the first phase is obviously to just increase police presence in the area. I think a lot of the concerns that we're hearing from residents is they don't feel safe in their own neighborhoods, which is disturbing to us to hear. So the first thing is to get more police officers down there, uniformed officers, bike officers, including officers on beats, and really try to address some of those concerns that they're having. And be able to intervene if there are people acting in an aggressive manner or do need additional services for them. So that's sort of the first phase. The second phase would be to, obviously, if there are individuals down there who are focusing on criminal activity, that's something we'll have to look at and make arrests where appropriate. We do have good collaboration with other not only our mental health outreach teams, but also other enforcement branches within our police department, including drug squad, property crime, who could target property crime offenders and that sort of thing. But again, really, I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing down there are as a result of mental health issues and drug abuse issues, which doesn't just fall under policing purview. It's really going to be a collaborative effort with our partners, with Vancouver Coastal Health and BC Housing, and working with the TIR as well. So that's essentially where the police fit into this.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that overview. Celine, I'd like to turn it over to you for a moment and just hear a little bit about some of the common questions we're receiving around what the city might be doing to address discarded needles or garbage or that are showing up in streets and parks in the area. And if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess maybe just to provide a bit of context as well. We know that homelessness has been more visible, and that COVID has really disproportionately impacted people living in poverty. So drop-ins, meal programs, community centers, libraries, places that people would frequent if they're living in housing, SROs in the neighborhood. Many of those places closed as a result of COVID, and so that really resulted in folks not having anywhere to go in the day. So you might be seeing, seeing more folks outside that would normally be accessing those services. And just to note, as the province does enter into phase 3 of the restart plan, the city is working to reopen some of those really vital community services to give folks a place to go to access things that we all miss and love so much. In terms of cleaning, I think we've heard for quite some time around kind of garbage and whatnot along Granville Street. So we have responded, our engineering crews. They do daily servicing of litter cans and recycling enclosures. They're doing street sweeping, litter collection, including needle pickup, as well as street flushing during the night. In recent weeks, we have added an additional shift to those cleanups. And we are also taking the same kinds of measures in the lanes that run adjacent to Granville Street, so along Seymour and Granville, as well as Haro and Granville. And we're also doing some extra cleaning around the gathering place, just to address some of the concerns that we've heard from neighbors. The other piece that I'd just like to mention as well is we are working with other outreach teams and service providers in the neighborhood. Our homelessness services outreach team, we are increasing our presence in the neighborhood to try to connect with folks that are more visibly homeless. I think the Howard Johnson, the great thing is people have moved inside and they have access to supports and services and have homes, but we know that there are a number of folks that are still living outside. So we're increasing our outreach and working in partnership with other outreach providers to try to support folks that are still along not only Granville Street, but also, pardon me, we're hearing concerns around Davie Street and the Jim Diva Plaza and whatnot. So we're expanding our outreach efforts there.
Thank you, Celine. And finally, you've touched on the kind of the short-term plans, but if you could maybe speak to the city's more long-term strategy for helping people experiencing homelessness in Vancouver, recognizing that it, as we've heard today, is a partnership approach that you're taking. But what do you see the city's role moving forward for this?
Yeah, well, and maybe just back to Dominic's presentation, I think, you know, the reasons why people fall into homelessness can often be complex and a result of a number of different factors, but the solutions to homelessness are really quite straightforward, and that's access to income, housing, and support. And we do have a role at the city in terms of our land use policies, providing land for housing, providing grants, and really building on the partnerships with the folks that are on the panel here to deliver much needed housing, income, and supports. And so we'll really look to do that going forward. And we are really encouraged by the efforts that are being made by our provincial partners in terms of creating more housing for those that need it the most.
Thanks, Celine. And so this brings us to the end of our questions, and I'd really like to thank you all for this discussion and for participating, and also to thank everybody who's tuned into this webinar for your time and attention. To learn more about what you've heard today and to participate in the online ongoing discussion, BC Housing would like to invite you to visit their Let's Talk Housing website, which you had seen the link for earlier and will be posted again. And you'll be able to go online, find out more information as it becomes available, submit any comments and questions, and see what other folks are asking about and talking about related to this new housing for people experiencing homelessness in the downtown core. So with that, I will bid everyone farewell. Thank you so much again for participating in your time, and I hope everyone is safe, and we'll see you next time.